Hey, you guys, what is up? It's been such a very long time since I have been on here. I do thank whoever and I thank everyone that is downloading my podcast and really listening to them. I thank everyone who's been rocking with me throughout this time. I've had a really rough journey these last couple of years, but we are here and we are on the up and up. This journey has taught me that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to really re-envision, rethink your life and redirect it and create a new path that you would like to go down. Okay, and that goes with any genre. That can be love, that can be with relationships, that can be with work, that can be with family, that can be with yourself. If you feel like you need to really deep dive within and figure out a new path and a new journey because the current one isn't working for you, I am a firm believer that, hey, it is what it is. You have to go back, get off of your behind, and figure out what is going to help you make it to your next purpose in life. What is your purpose in life? And y'all just done got started on a tangent, but the conversation that we're going to talk about today is grief. And grief, I'm really close to this topic because I've had a lot of grief in my life, okay? I've dealt with grief as a child from my grandfather passing, to teenage when my father passed, to mourning just different versions of myself that have just, passed on and a new version of myself has created. So over the journey of these last couple of years, I have really just been able to sit with myself really and honestly get close to grief. Like, why is grief something that we avoid? Why is, transitioning into another cycle of our lives something that is feared? As we get older, we begin to realize that grief is not something to be feared, but something that we should be able to use so that we can transition along with it. Grief is never something that leaves us. It's not, you don't get over the passing of a loved one. You don't get over the passing of an old version of yourself. But what you do is you acknowledge where you were in that journey and you begin to grow with it in life. And you begin to figure out ways of how you can use that to help you succeed and become a better version of yourself. A lot of time grief shows us the areas in our lives that we need to work on. Are we codependent with this person? Are we codependent with this lifestyle? Are we codependent on our old selves? Are we just not really wanting to let go of who we were and becoming a better version of ourselves? And if we don't want to let go and become a better version of ourselves, why? Are we afraid of fear? Are we afraid of success? Are we afraid of failure? Are we afraid of, being who we were classified, quote unquote, deemed to be, instead of proving people wrong? And sometimes hitting rock bottom is really grief's way of showing us that that version of yourself that made you hit rock bottom was not benefiting you in the first place. Y'all just done ran off. So let's get back on topic. So first and foremost, some important truths that we need to realize and deal with about grief is that grief doesn't follow rules or a timeline. Grief is not linear. It's not the same. It's not like, okay, today I'm okay and I'm going to be okay every day after this. No, not at all. Some days we're going to be okay. Some days we're going to struggle. Some days we're going to go back to being okay. Some days we're going to be in that weird, awkward, in-between stage where it's like, I'm not really okay, but I'm not really doing bad either. Grief is like a roller coaster. Some days you're going to have good days. Some days you're going to have bad days. But one thing to really realize is that two emotions in this situation can exist at the same time. You can feel sadness and you can also feel relief when it's coming down to grief. You can have this situation where you love this person with all your heart, but you're angry at them for hurting you. You can feel this sense of relief and this sense of calm while also experiencing this sense of pain. Grief is not about being confined to one category or being locked into this container where there's no room for us to explode and be who we need to be. Grief teaches us that our emotions are normal. Having these feelings teaches us that we actually are human. We actually do feel. And grief can really touch people or really, bother people who have difficulty expressing their emotions and being vulnerable with who they are. So healing doesn't always mean that you're forgetting or that you're moving on from a situation or from a person. It just means that I'm learning to carry this while also learning to continue to live my life. It reveals truths about ourselves. Like, it can expose that we actually have some unmet needs. I'm not really taking care of myself, I really didn't put myself first in that relationship, or I really didn't put myself first at that job, or I really didn't just take the time out and sleep and revive and relearn and relive myself. It can be a deepening of your self-awareness of who you are, but also to cause accountability. And I know, a lot of us, we think that, I'm very accountable. But the reality of it is, we could have some difficulty with taking accountability for the actions that we partake in causing certain situations in our lives. So this whole, newfound level of grief can actually be a way for us to reshape the boundaries that we have already in place. If we have boundaries, a lot of us are born into these families and born into these matriarchs where our parents didn't know boundaries. Their parents didn't know boundaries. Their parents didn't know boundaries. And so now we're the 5th, 6th, 7th generation, and we're sitting here struggling about how to set boundaries with people. Do I set boundaries with my mother because she's the one who raised me? However, she's using me money-wise. Or do I set boundaries with my favorite cousin who only calls me to trauma dump? How do I set aside this time and figure out what's important in my life? Grief can expose all of these things, and it can be really uncomfortable. Not because it's making us face that the people in our lives are taking advantage of us, but it's making us face some really terrible truths about ourselves. We do not have self-worth. We do not have the ability to love ourselves. We don't know how to love ourselves. And is that something that we want to continue? I don't really think so. Or is that something that we want to take a step back and be like, you know what? All of this is kind of painful. It kind of hurts. I don't really want to go through this. But do I want to continue to be who I was yesterday? Do I want to continue to be a doormat? Do I want to continue to cry and not really know how to express myself? Do I want to continue to feel all of this anger that's built up inside of me and I don't really know where it's coming from? So those are I want you to really be able to take a moment, take a step back, think, right, pause me for like 5 seconds or a minute, 60 seconds. And I want you to think, when was the first time that you really felt like you felt grief? Was it because someone passed? Or was it because an old version of you passed? Take a moment to think about that. Why do we grieve? Why? A lot of us, it'd be like, if I could not have any emotions, I would be perfectly A-okay. And to this day, I agree with it. I wish to God that I didn't have any emotions. But that's what sets us apart from being robots and being, these other earthly beings or other ungodly beings that we feel don't have the ability to express themselves or have these deep empathetic emotions. We grieve because we attach to people. We attach to love, we attach to investments, we attach to hope, we attach to the future version of who we want to be. We build meaning around people and we give them roles, we give them expectations, and then we have all of this experience. And when we're going through these experiences, we're not just physically going through these experiences, but our mind, our body, and our soul are also going through these experiences. So when we're grieving, we're just not grieving this person or this situation. We are also trying to recalibrate our feelings. We're trying to recalibrate our emotions. We're trying to recalibrate our being without them. Now we had gotten used to being on their same rhythm, being on their same energy frequency. And now that we are alone and by ourselves, we're trying to figure out, well, I'm no longer vibrating with this person. My energy frequency is no longer on their level. So what am I supposed to do? Grief is really the natural, emotional, psychological, and even sometimes physical response of losing someone or something that really mattered to us. We had all of these expectations that we were going to live out the rest of our days with this certain expectation of how life is supposed to be. It reflects the depth of the bond, and it's not necessarily, having these emotions does not make us weak. It just makes us realize that there is a connection that has been disrupted. Whether it's through death or separation, betrayal is a definitely big one that causes us to have some type of traumatic associated with grief, or life changes. Our mind, body, and soul, they all have to process the absence and reorganize around this new reality. We're no longer living in the fantasy of this is the way life is supposed to be. Now we have to take a step back, dial it down a little bit, and realize that this is my new normal. This is my new reality. And with all of this, when you have a new normal and a new reality, it's not just, the consistency of things that didn't work out, but you now have the opportunity of realizing, what do I want in life? How do I want my life to look? What do I want my life to be like? How can I create this new reality to be what I always dreamed of? Now I want you to take a moment. I want you to pause me for another 60 seconds. And I want you to think, what did you want to be when you were a child? And how does that reflect to who you are today? I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about that. So grief also serves a purpose. It helps us acknowledge that something changed. It allows us to feel and release all this impact, that loss, rather than suppress it. Grief is going to force you to feel what you didn't want to feel for all those years. So in the reality of all this grief, it's no longer about, this is the person, this is the situation. It's more so, I want you to take a moment and think back on, the situation. What are you really missing? Are you missing that you felt chosen with this person? Did you feel loved? Did you feel prioritized? If it's work, did you feel stability? Did you feel a routine? Did you feel like you belonged to this group of people? Did you feel like that you were this person that you wanted to be all your life, and that reality was interrupted? Are you mourning the future you, or the future that you always imagined to be? Like the future relationship, the future children, the future money. Did you lose any safety, trust, or emotional security? Whenever you're thinking about grief, it's no longer about who I'm missing. It's more so what did this person, what did this situation, what did this job, what did this, this energy field provide for me? What do I now have to recalibrate my life to associate and look without it? Sometimes we think that we're missing them or the situation, but when we slow it down a little bit and we really begin to sit with ourselves, and we begin to sit with, the new reality and the new normal, we begin to peel back those layers. It's the safety, the desirability, the understood, the not being alone, which is a really big one. Loneliness, and that's fair. I don't want to sit here and take away from it, because technically we are human, and we were created to be, with other people. We were created to procreate and to live our lives with, a partner. So is it that we felt lonely? Is it that we felt that our mission on this earth was to produce and procreate and really be the best version of ourselves with another person? We sometimes miss the version of ourselves that existed in that space, when in reality, you're always going to be who you were in that space. Now that you are going through this evolution and transforming into a new person, you're creating more space so that you can be a more for yourself and be better for yourself. We began to think about the one, who may have felt more open. We felt more hopeful, more secure. But this is teaching us that something was missing all along, because if we only felt open, hopeful, and secure in this relationship, why couldn't we feel this by ourselves? What part did we miss that we needed to reach out for something or someone to feel hopeful, secure, and open in these relationships, whether it's with a person, place, or a thing? Separating those pieces can be uncomfortable, especially when you're in the middle of it. When you're in the middle of, transitioning and transforming, you don't see none of that. All you see is just the tunnel. Like, all you have is tunnel vision, and it can seem like it's really dark and you really don't have any light, and you're really just getting by crawling on your hands and your knees. But we have to take our time and take a step back and look beyond the person in the situation and look into our own emotional world. And now this is, y'all know I like to go take it back to the childhood. But this is what we really need to be more clear and create clarity within ourselves. What happened in our childhood that we felt we needed to long for this in our adult lives? It's about more so the impact that this situation has had on us, and less about how can I grow through this grief. Naming what it was instead of minimizing it will help us be able to see the bigger picture. Okay. So, I have some good reflections, some questions I want you guys to think about, over the next, couple days, next week. Y'all know how I do. I'll give y'all a couple weeks and then I'll disappear. I don't want to do that this time. I'm really trying to find some consistency and continuity in my life. All right? I want you guys to take a moment and, if you have time, I want you to look up Maslow's hierarchy. I'm going to go through it really, really quickly. So with the Maslow's hierarchy, it tells us that in life we have a couple different things. We have the physiological needs, which is, the basic things are being met, housing, food. We have things like this. And then it's safety. Do I feel secure in who I am? Do I have a place to lay my head? And then it's love and belonging. Do I feel loved? Do I feel like I belong? Do I feel like I have connection and intimacy in my life? The next one is esteem. Do I feel worthy? Do I feel like I am enough? Do I have these affirmations that I'm able to tell myself and I actually believe them? And then self-actualization. Is this the version of myself that I want to be? I want you guys to take a moment over the next couple days, or, over the next week, and I want you to really identify where in your life you feel like you're lacking these things. And if you feel like you can't think about it, I want you to think about who or what provided this, and do you feel that is what is attacking you right now in your current life? So if you have a moment, look up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I want you to look through the physiological needs, the safety needs, your loving and belonging needs, your self-esteem needs, and your self-actualization. And once you do that, I want you to do some reflection. What are you really missing? What are you missing for your physiological, safety, love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization needs? And next week we'll do the 2.0 of the Growing with Grief. I hope you guys have a fantastic day and live, love, and life.